Did you know that ransomware actually is not a brand new thing? The very first ransomware that anyone ever experienced happened in 1989 by way of distribution of a floppy disk at an event. And basically, attendees thought they were taking home something informational and they loaded it up on their computers. And guess what? To get out of it, they needed to send in some money. Now, fast forward to today. The risk of ransomware and cyber threats is higher than ever. And what's that common link at the end of the day? It's much easier for those particular threats to end in a payout. And so what we're here to talk about today is getting it so that you don't have to pay the ransom. I want you to protect your data, govern it, and be able to recover it. My name is Teresa Miller, and I'm a principal technologist with Cohesity. So here's an overview of what we're going to be talking about today in a little bit more detail. So first of all, we need to do that level set. What's the current state of cybersecurity in the industry? Then we're going to talk about data management best practices so that you don't have to pay the ransom. And then we're going to wrap things up by talking about data governance and recovery with Cohesity. All right, so let's dive in. The state of the industry. So today, cloud acceleration is higher than ever. Remote work is common and cybercrime is on the rise. So cloud spend, $396 billion this year and growing 18% annually. As a result of the pandemic, 55% of employees are now saying they'd prefer to work remotely at least 3 days a week, and that cybercrime is costing worldwide $10.5 trillion. Now, this is totally different than a couple of years ago, and it's a landscape that's being taken advantage of. The other piece to this is increasing concerns. So those of you that are running organizations, or if you're a practitioner that is in charge of data for your organization, you don't want to be one of these headlines. And the risks are real, and the outcomes, the things that are happening, are truly concerning. So for example, data is being taken. Ransomware attacks are on the rise. And even in some cases, humans are being affected. Let's talk about that a little bit more. That cybersecurity landscape is changing. And Gartner has a really great predictions post where they're talking about how protecting operational technology is more important than ever because of human safety. And that the CEOs for the organization must drive that innovation. Now, one example I wanted to provide for you here, while it's not a ransomware situation, I think it really brings forth the human safety side of things and what we really need to be thinking about. There was a water treatment plant here in the US, and the operator's machine was taken over. And what was happening as a result of somebody else driving that keyboard and mouse is they were in to change the zinc levels of the water. Now, thankfully, the operator was there to be able to call that in and stop it from happening before anything tragic occurred. But these are the things that we need to change as a result of cybersecurity changing. So it's really, really important to be rethinking your strategy. So first and foremost, when we think about infrastructure and where all of our data lives behind the scenes, we spend 40% of our weekly time installing and managing and maintaining that data infrastructure. So that can add up to wasted time, for example, if we could leverage an as a service. Now, by way of negotiations and lost deals. 39% of deals are actually lost to larger organizations. And that's unfortunate because there's a lot of really great enterprises of all sizes out there. So we want to make sure our strategy supports staying online and protecting that data to make sure that any organization can get that deal. And this year, we have seen every 11 seconds, an organization is experiencing ransomware. And that's a new organization, obviously not the same organization, but nonetheless, that's prolific. And so these things need to stand out and help you rethink that strategy. All right, so now let's talk about some of the data management best practices to help you avoid paying the ransom. So we're going to put that strategy change into action, or perhaps if you're doing some of these things, then you'll get to that next level. So first and foremost, data governance. Every organization, regardless of its size, has large amounts of data. That data lives in databases, sometimes in an application. It can be locationally on-prem. It can be at the edge. It can be in the cloud. And by way of this landscape change and how we function as businesses, we don't often know what we have from a data perspective. And that's where data governance comes in. What is recommended from a best practice perspective is to ultimately assemble a team. That team should involve IT as well as some power users that have eyes and ears throughout the organization, and even at different locations or even different geos, depending on the size of your organization. And here are those benefits of doing that. You're going to get better detection of cyber incidents and security concerns if you put the right data governance plan in place. You're actually going to reduce data management costs because you've actually then wrapped your arms around what you have from a data perspective and you understand it. You're also going to gain data analytics, as well as you should be choosing data governance options that are going to help you stay security compliant with whatever your organization needs to adhere to. Every organization out there likely has different compliance needs. So having a data governance plan will help you keep that in check. Now, taking this a step further, it can actually help reduce that tech team workload. And I'm talking about the infrastructure team that is battling these security issues. If you have a data governance plan that helps you identify problems, you are going to help relieve actually even some of the stress that that team is going through. You'll gain insights into having the proper reports for decision making with a centralized data governance plan and solution to run it. And it's going to help you align with those ever so important enterprise compliance standards. Now I'm going to shift gears into routine recovery testing. So again, we all work for enterprises that have a lot of data. Your enterprise, I can guess, is similar to others where you have on-prem, you have cloud, edge, or just some combination. Maybe it's not in exact alignment with that, but it's a combination. And so recovery testing becomes important. We can't just back up that data. If we haven't tested it, we're not prepared for that ransomware disaster that could be occurring in the next, week. We don't know if that will happen. We hope we're prepared, but recovery should be available for us. So ransomware preparedness, accidental deletion, even intentional deletion of data sometimes happens. You need to know that you've tested and can get that data back. Now, The other piece to this, of course, is recovery from cyber incidents and even the unexpected. I personally have been in many different scenarios where the unexpected occurred. For example, scripts that overwrote servers with desktop OS. Again, totally unexpected, totally unintentional, but that recovery needed to occur because I had hundreds of systems that were all of a sudden desktops instead of servers serving the organization. And so things like that are why we need routine recovery testing, so we know what the SLA is for getting back online. All right, so now let's shift into talking about simplicity at scale by way of best practices. So we can make our jobs easier as practitioners, as CIOs, as strategists, if we leverage as a service, for example, if we don't have to stand up the infrastructure to protect our data. By way of having consolidated data across multiple use cases, we're now practicing data governance. So for example, if I could manage disaster recovery, dev test, or even archival from a single solution to manage those use cases, I now have centralized data. And from that centralized data, I can get analytics and reporting that help me understand that particular data. The next best practice I want to talk about is intelligent reports and detection. So when you talk about reporting, it's important to be able to, again, going back to data governance, be able to understand if you have sensitive information out there. PII, for example. I worked at an organization where a user had an Excel file, and they sent it out to a person that really should see the information, but they sent it out clear text without it being in a protected system. And they reported it right away when they realized they did the wrong thing. But ideally, if we could have detected that sensitive information in that file before it had been sent out, that would have been the ideal situation. So having the ability to do intelligent reporting and detection can go a long way and keep you out of the situation that I was in. The other thing that you can gain by intelligent reports is it can help you actually search and visualize your data. So you may detect things that you didn't even know were a problem just because you could search that data. Leveraging machine learning to detect odd behaviors, to have that be reported back to you and know that you need to act on it immediately, will also prevent the worst. And then having visibility into your data to ensure compliance. Most organizations have some level of compliance to adhere to, and it's great to get peace of mind knowing just because you had a report to verify that compliance is indeed in place. And being able to identify high-risk items and events in advance of anything bad happening. All right, so the final best practice that I have for you today revolves around following frameworks. And today specifically, I'm going to talk about the NIST cybersecurity framework. But as all of you are likely aware, you know there's other frameworks. Now, the benefit of leveraging frameworks such as NIST is it does give you some guidance around the best ways to deal with cybersecurity and cyber threats. Again, in advance, you're being proactive. And many government organizations leverage this, but you don't have to be in government or in a top security environment to be able to take advantage of implementing this. So the first piece to the NIST framework is the ability to identify. So really understanding what devices you have by way of asset management, governance, some of the risk management, and some other things you see here. Also protect, being able to protect that data and make sure that nothing is going to happen it. So for example, by way of worm technologies to ensure that the data can't be tampered with. Then in terms of detection, being able to have a strategy in place to detect anomalies and be notified about it. Have a response plan. So what happens when something does get through? All the way down to the communication, this framework helps provide that guidance. And then recovery. We talked about recovery quite a bit already, but recovery planning is critical to being able to get back online. And so the NIST framework does include that as well. All right, so now let's shift gears into the data governance and recovery section by way of Cohesity. And I will be doing a demo in this section as well, so you can see what we're doing around this space. So by way of core capabilities, we are in alignment with that NIST framework. So we can help you identify issues. We have global search, and we can do data classification and data governance. My demo will be around data governance. By way of protection, we can help you with immutable backups. We do leverage worm. When you're protecting files with our worm capabilities, you actually get that protection at the file level as well, which is a huge benefit. By way of detection, we can do anomaly detection, behavior analytics to let you know by way of alerts and notifications that something isn't quite right. And then respond. So by way of respond, we can help with access remediation, data forensics, reporting, and then lastly, recovery. So by way of recovery, we offer instant mass recovery, where you can bring back hundreds of servers all at once. And we even offer an Active Directory granular recovery, which Active Directory in itself, being able to do the granular recovery is interesting. But personally, I actually worked at an organization, and this was many years ago before any of this was even that prolific. But the Active Directory servers for this environment were breached, and ultimately we were down to one AD server. And thankfully we had that, and we didn't need to go to an actual backup to get a recovery, just because of how Active Directory functions. But the risk is real, and that's my point, is that you need to be able to recover from any situation, and as a core capability, we offer that. So one of the other things I'd like to talk about is our Cohesity threat defense architecture. So at the heart of it all, and being able to recover, whether it's from a cyber threat or even just from an operational perspective, it starts with your data. And data resiliency is one of the core focuses that we have in this space. So making sure that there's encryption, fault tolerance, immutability, that is also important. We make sure that zero trust principles are followed by way of access controls. We offer MFA, RBAC, and more, as you can see here. We then take that defense architecture out to the detection and analytics by way of making sure that any data that we are working with of yours, You get the alerts if there's a problem. We have a fantastic partner ecosystem around all of this, and they are listed here. And all of this is AI powered. We realize that threats are no longer static. It's no longer like that floppy disk incident of ransomware that I shared with you at the beginning of the presentation. These cyber threats are changing in a way that's almost hard to keep up with. And so you can do all of this with your data through AI, an AI backend. And all of this threat defense architecture comes together through Cohesity Helios. We can do everything and support you through a single solution with this offering. So next, let's take a closer look at how this looks. I'm going to show you a demo around data governance. Before we dive in, I'm going to go ahead and show you my data set that I'm leveraging here in OneDrive. By way of OneDrive, there is a particular folder here called Icarus Power that you're going to see me create some detection and rules for. In addition to that, I'd like to show you just some of the files in here so that you're familiar with their names. Over and above this, I also am working with a group. So when I'm creating rules, you're going to see this group name. And the other important piece to this is there are people in this group, for example, that should only have access to certain files in Icarus Power. And when somebody else is added to that group, a detection will occur. So that's kind of setting the stage. This is all my file data. I'm going to go ahead and now switch gears over to my data governance platform. So what you're looking at here is the main dashboard. Just want you to take a look. You can see we have some detections and we have some areas where there are no detections, such as inside the organization. But I want to step back for a second and just kind of show you how we got here. So the first thing we did was we actually registered a data source. By way of data source, I registered my M365 tenant so that I'd have access to my OneDrive data that I showed you at the beginning. The other piece for this to work that needs to be in place are policies and patterns. So the first thing is policies. By way of policies, we have the ability to, for example, align with GDPR, or if you go out to our library, we have HIPAA, we have CCPA for California, or you can even create your own policy by which detection may occur. Now in this case, GDPR is finding some matches, and I think it's interesting to call that out. If I want to view those matches, all I need to do is download the report. When I download the report, I can view that data, and I know exactly which files I need to take a look at and what might be in violation of GDPR. The other thing that's important here are patterns. By way of patterns, we have the ability to help you detect within your files if there's any information you don't want there. So for example, social security numbers, credit cards, or anything else that may qualify as PII in your organization. You also can create your own patterns if you don't quite have what you need by way of this list. Now that we have our data classification policies and patterns in place, the policies are already doing some detection, we can now get into these shields that we started with at the beginning of the demo. So clearly by way of insider threats, things are looking great, but not by way of wide access. So let's take a closer look. So I get this really great dashboard when I click in here that gives me some information around what is going on, but I need to take you into the rules for this to be more clear. So if I click rules, I have a whole list of rules by which I'm doing detection. There's two specifically in this list. that I'm going to show you. So first of all, by way of Icarus Power, so that's that OneDrive folder, we have some sensitive data that we're trying to detect. Now, sensitive data is detected by way of policies. So we took a look at our data classification policies and we were able to then create this rule. So we're looking just simply at all policy with this condition. We're looking for a classifier policy sensitivity of high or medium. And specifically, we need to be looking at our folder Icarus Power. So that's going to help us find that PII, that sensitive data, in that folder. Now, the other rule I want to focus on today is this overexposure rule. Now, by way of this rule, we have it applying to Icarus Power, again, that subset of files in that folder, and we're looking at the security permissions on this. So basically, if the person is in this group, they're good, but if the person is not in this group, it's going to come up on my list and I'm going to be able to take a look at that and then take on some active remediations. All right, so now that we've reviewed the rules that we have in place, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the summary information and what these particular conditions are actually catching. So the first one I want to show you is that if I scroll down here, I have this one. So the Icarus Power overexposure, if I click into this, I can see that by way of permissions, a lot of people have access to these sensitive files, and I need to go in and take a look at the permission set because by way of that group, there are detections that we weren't expecting. There are permissions in place that we weren't expecting. The other one that I want to take a look at with you is this one, the sensitive data. So this is going to align with like PII, in our case GDPR, and essentially we have multiple files in Icarus Power that have sensitive data in it. So again, we need to dive in and research. Now, if you wanted, you could also, at this level, download a report of all of those detections so that you could take a closer look. You can do that here. So that wraps up this demo on data governance. All right, so now let's wrap things up with some key takeaways. I put together a checklist for you around how you can be prepared from a data governance perspective so that if a ransomware event or a cyber incident affects you because of how much more prolific they are than ever, you'll be prepared. So here's my list. So first and foremost, you want that data governance team, but also make sure that that team is leveraging a simple and reliable solution to be able to get eyes and ears into vulnerabilities as well as PII and other data in your environment that might be putting your organization at risk. Make sure you truly have a solid data governance plan. This is going to take time. So for those of you that have started doing this, you likely have a ways to go. And for those of you who need to get started, make it a priority because it's going to truly help you protect that data in a way that you've never done before. You want to make sure you're leveraging intelligent reporting and detection, and make sure you follow the security frameworks that apply to your organization. So I just wanted to thank everyone for joining my session today.